feel free to answer to the poll that is displayed on the screen here. But I'll go ahead, give a quick round of introduction. Hi, I'm Sarupya. I work for Groundhog, which is a mine digitization and automation platform. And Groundhog has been in this mining industry for about 10 years now. And we've moved from being just an underground to open pit as well. And then moving from being an operations only product to now a safety and operations platform. So we've come a long way. And this is our attempt to share our knowledge and knowledge of the people here to the industry to be able to educate people more on the challenges of digital transformation and what it takes to execute a successful digital project. So here we have a panel today, a lot of great folks here. I would just go ahead and start with introduction of Brett. Brett is a mining professional here in Australia from Macman, and he has about 20 years of experience in maintenance, planning, and reliability. He's passionate about the development and implementation of technologies that will help mining teams improve efficiency and effectiveness. It's Brett's strong belief that the technology solutions empower organization and people to perform their highest level. So that's Brett. Then Michelle, she needs no introduction, but she has been working in mining for about 30 years now, and she has held operational and strategic roles, most recently as technology executive for Oz Minerals, and prior to that, CEO of Geovia for the Source Systems. She also sits on the board of startups such as Railware and Offworld. So that's Michelle. Then Satish. Satish is the CEO of Groundhog, and Groundhog specializes in mine digitization and automation. He has a background in technology, strategy, operation, and product management. He's passionate about process optimization and automation using data and technology. He has over 20 years of experience in the tech industry and has a lot of patents, and he's a sought after advisor for digital transformation. That's Satish there. And then Kim. Kim is an entrepreneur at heart, starting businesses from real estate to tech. His passion centers around enabling exceptional human performance at all organizational levels. Kim has spent over 15 years in the mining industry, and his relentless focus on inclusive human performance has led Kim through rapid promotions with Rio Tinto, where he has improved driver performance, tire life, and team morale. Ultimately, his passion led him back to his entrepreneurship roots as a co-founder of Max9. Human performance and behavior coaching are kind of his expertise. Okay. The next one is Mike. Mike is a mining engineer and business leader with about 20 years of leadership experience, spanning multiple industries over 5 continents. His career includes mine operating experience with Barrick, and then progressive project and general management experience in advanced technology with modular mining systems, and area management and business development experience with Schindler Management. During Mike's career, he has been responsible for the definition and development of business plans, and systems justification, management of the commercial elements, and the implementation of AHS solutions as well. He has a strong background in safety and productivity improvement using technology, and he also has a lot of background in solving problems, operational problems, and helping people execute successfully. So that's mine. So having said that, with this quick round of introduction, we'll get started a little bit on the logistics here. We will go through a round of what does digital transformation mean to all our panelists and why it's important. And then we will have a more open discussion around the challenges that they have come across and stories that they would like to share. So this is basically now, I would hand it over to Brett. Maybe you can start and talk a little bit about what digital transformation means to and why it's important. Brett, you're on mute.
About that, still getting the hang of it. Technology is a tough thing to get your head around. Thanks for that. Yeah, obviously the digital journey for most organisations is covers a large range of items, from simple digital collection right through to digitising processes and the like, all the way through to automation. Certainly for a lot of the organisations I'm working with, it's usually about streamlining data flows and information. It's clearly important for businesses at the moment, because as our labour markets become tighter and tighter, we need to do or allow our people who have better skill sets rather than straight data entry to do the jobs we employ them for. But also our equipment is getting smarter, effectively providing more data that we need to be able to review and quickly assess to be able to make those decisions that keep our operations running. So I think that in a nutshell is why it's important to keep looking at that digital space and how we progress into it in the coming years.
Thanks, Brett. Michelle, you want to go next?
Yeah, look, absolutely. So digitization or digital transformation, I think, is fundamentally important to our industry, because it gives us the opportunity to harness the fantastic power of computing and digital technologies that are becoming ubiquitous. Basically all of us have supercomputers in our pockets, and most of them on our cars, as Brett pointed out. And so as I found out recently, even our pumps that we installed in some of our underground mines are now wired to the net and able to do really interesting things. But so it's how do we harness this wonderful opportunity, mitigate against some of the threats, because yeah, absolutely, cyber's been in the news, certainly here in Australia quite a lot recently, with both Optus and Medibank having some cyber challenges. So we've got to mitigate those threats, but we can use this technology to really do more things with the fantastic people that we have. And I think, Brett rightfully pointed out that not only are we expanding as an industry as we decarbonise and end up needing more copper, more nickel, more of some of those sorts of things to help us in the world with that process. But there are less and less people wanting to get involved in mining, which I think is a tragedy. Having been in the mining industry for 30 years, it is a fantastic place to have a career as far as I'm concerned. But we really need to be able to augment the capability of our people, whether that is somebody who's used to operating trucks and or doing services or maintenance or whatever it might be, or whether that's somebody who's a geologist and a mining engineer and those sorts of capabilities. And I really think if we can focus some of this technology on 5 significant challenges that I think we have in the industry, we will radically change not only our industry, we'll make our industry a lot more sexy and people want to come and actually, be part of our industry, but also we will make the world a much more, a better place to live in terms of rising standards of living for people without breaking the planet. And just very quickly, those 5 challenges I think we've got is, global ore body knowledge. How do we know more about our ore bodies? How do we find ore bodies, faster, cheaper? But then when we do have them, how do we know more about them down to the last gram, down to the last meter, so we can, be much more organised and planned, etc. Automation and electrification. So, how do we take people not out of the industry, but out of the coalface, which, I think all of us can accept that, working in a mine at least has more risks than working in an office. So how do we create that environment and, create the diversity that enables us to have? And we, electrify with the whole decarbonisation sort of process. The third would be around precision extraction. So how do we take just the metal that we're interested in and not the rest of the rock? So as most of you would know, we move around about 11 tonnes of waste for about 5 grams of gold. The ratios for copper are not that much better, slightly better, but not that much better. So we move a lot of waste. In fact, we are waste movers, and we mine metal as a byproduct. But so the fourth one would be around symbiotic relationships with our communities. How do we create greater wealth for our communities? And then the very last one, which is an emerging one, I think, which is, how does how do we then create different business models, different value models to again radically change our industry? We've seen other industries change over the last sort of 10 or 20 years. So that would be, sorry, a long explanation to a very simple question.
That's great, Michelle. I think a lot of great points there, and we'll elaborate on some of them in the next round for sure. Satish, you want to go next?
Sure. For me, digital transformation is a stepping stone for automation, because I mean, like Brett and Michelle alluded to, we are starting to see labor shortages. We are starting to see technology advanced, autonomous miners and stuff. And any mine that wants to leverage autonomous equipment well needs to first undergo a digital transformation. And to me, what a digital transformation means is it goes beyond just going digital, which is just capturing all the data. The transformation involves getting insights from the data, changing job roles, changing progression plans, progression planning, and then breaking down the silos across all these organizations within the mine that we always talk about. So digitization goes a long way towards at least capturing the data and then making it available across the organization. And the transformation aspect helps cross-functional teams within the mine mine faster and better. We are investing a lot of capital into equipment and into people. And it's, once you apply transformational technologies and processes, you're able to better utilize the equipment and also, maximize ton moved per operating hour, right? Those kinds of things are more transformational than just, capturing data, at least in my mind. And once you get to that point, automating mining gets so much more easier.
Thanks, Satish. Kim, do you want to give your view on what you think digital transformation means?
Yeah, thank you. I think like a lot of great points. And if I'm going to probably simplify it from my point of view, I'm an operational guy. I joined mining. I'm a greenie at heart, but I joined in mining because my view has always been, if you're going to change something, change it from within. Don't try and belt it around, and make a monster out of it, because ultimately we do need all of the resources that we are taking out of the earth, and how do we do that more sustainably? So that's sort of where I come from in this sort of story. And so when I talk about what does digital transformation look like, from my point of view, I think it's the fusion of meaningful technology into an operational setting that measurably improves the business in which it's being applied to. And from that point of view, it can be as simple as a really basic data capture device that reduces the administrative burden on an administrator, for the 8 o'clock meeting to get a report out, or it could be all the way through to full automation, or as Michelle is alluding to, and I know I've seen you speak a few times around, how do we just target, the product in situ, and do we really need to pull the valuable metals out, to just wear them or do things along those lines? Can we look at alternates? Granted, we do use some of those valuable metals for manufacturing and for other purposes, but can we look at things a little bit differently? And so then I guess the final point is that it's not technology or digitization for the sake of it. It's making sure that you're using the right hammer for that particular application. So don't use a sledgehammer when a tiny little hammer will do, and you're going to get the same or better result out of that.
That's awesome, Kim. And Mike, do you want to talk a little bit from a perspective of, from Ramjack's perspective as a technology integrator? What does digital transformation mean to you, and why it's important?
Sure. Thanks, Rupia. I don't know whether it's easier or harder to go last, but obviously everybody has said some extremely intelligent things about digital transformation. But at the risk of maybe oversimplifying, and I think Kim's been reading my notes, because I kind of feel like we're coming from the same perspective here. And I look at it like mining's a tough industry, and it's just getting tougher and tougher. It's tougher to find the right ore bodies. It's tougher to mine those ore bodies productively and economically. And so when we look at digital transformation, we're really looking at merging two colliding worlds. I mean, fundamentally, mining is about blowing up rock and moving it into a processing plant. And now we're talking about how do we get the advantages of an industry that's completely different to mining, which is the high-tech industry. So figuring out how these colliding worlds work together, I think, is the fundamental challenge of digital transformation. And we've all experienced it, whether it's been a failed deployment or a misalignment in expectations. All of those things are driven by what I think is this sort of colliding worlds thing. So for me, and at the risk of oversimplifying, digital transformation is just simply about realizing value from technology and mining. And I think that's exactly where Kim was going with his,
Thanks, mate. You made it a lot more simple than I did.
Yeah, and I'd say also a lot of the times it's not really about technology at all. It's about all those other things and all those peripherals around the technology. So a severe oversimplification, but that's what it means to me.
Thank you. I mean, great points, and I think everyone was spot on there, right? It's a lot more about change management, dealing with other things other than just technology. So this gives a nice segue into the next section, which is basically talking about challenges at all different levels or types of challenges. But before we go into that, another poll and a few pointers on just any questions. I know you all might have a lot of questions, but please reserve them till the end. And you can ask your questions in the end. We'll have about 10 minutes for question answer session. But here's a poll that you can put in for, what do you think are the biggest challenges in the digital transformation industry? In the meantime, we'll get started with just the panel discussion on those topics. The first one we would start off with is basically leadership, right? What kind of challenges do you face, Michelle and Brett, there in terms of getting buy-in from leadership, or from a leadership perspective? How do you set the vision? How do you look at these projects, and what are the challenges you face? And also, if you can share any stories, examples of things that work, things that didn't work, that would be great. So Michelle, maybe you can start off there, and then Brett and others can join in into the discussion there.
Yeah, sure. So leadership challenges. So look, I think there's a number. If I just sort of block them into a couple of different categories. So I think that the one that goes across the board is really around risk and how we think about risk in our industry, both in terms of how we think about it from what is the risk that is being introduced by this new technology, this new way of doing it. And I think we bias both ways. Sometimes we oversimplify and we forget that we're actually about to get 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, 125,000 people to do something differently. Which is a significant challenge, and then sometimes we bias the other way. So in that particular case, I've had examples where people go, oh, this is going to be easy. We're going to introduce mobile phones into everybody in our underground. Everyone to use a mobile phone, so this is going to be simple, and then suddenly realize that changing the work processes. In fact, I've done this myself. We literally did this, and I thought, this is going to be simple. This isn't going to be a big challenge, and we focused on some of the older age groups, thinking they will be the most challenged by this new technology. Worked a lot with them, did a lot of UX sort of development, and then suddenly realized that in fact the younger team members were the ones that were having the biggest problem, because we hadn't focused in on them and actually brought them along on the ride, and also because we hadn't made it intuitive in their way of thinking, and even that was a learning for me, that there is quite a difference in the generations in terms of how we think about technology, how we use it, how we interact with it. So you know, that for me is around risk, but it's also around our own learning as leaders. I learned a lot during that process, in terms of technology, people, how we interact with it. The other thing in that particular example that was really interesting was the supervisors were actually the group that ended up becoming most disintermediated and therefore resentful and challenged by this this new way of doing things. And it was just because, again, when we thought about risk and how we were going to mitigate it, we did not think at all about the change of the role of the supervisor. So the supervisors had thought about their role as being one of data distribution. I go out to people, I give them their jobs, I train them, develop them, we do our JSAs, all that sort of good safety stuff. But thereafter, my job is to then make sure that everybody has the right information for them to do their jobs. So they spend a lot of their time, around the mine distributing information, whether it's on the radio or physically. And then suddenly we have this device that can do it automatically for them. And everybody now has the same information almost pretty much in real time. And they're suddenly going, well, wow, what's my job now? Like it's not that they don't do anything, but they felt that they had been undermined by this process. And it took us a while to really understand that. And so we then had to, rethink with the supervisors. So what does that mean the supervisor's role now is? Well, of course, it's around problem solving, because they have these fantastic experience, these great skills. What they need to now do is prioritize all of the problems that are in the mine, and which ones do they solve simultaneously. And it was interesting when we turned that corner and again got the supervisors, and I know there's questions around leadership, so we're sort of talking about that, but suddenly the teams and the supervisors started thinking of different ways to, again, just use this very basic implementation of a technology that we had never dreamed of. So, they started FaceTiming each other. So, if they were like the second or third problem that was going to be looked at, they would FaceTime each other and say, hey, maintenance person, look at this. Don't travel 2 hours across my mine to come and have a look at my problem. Just have a, look at this video I'm sending you in real time. They'd coach each other. Sometimes the guys would even ring from home, because we distributed the phones as personal issue. And they'd sort of ring each other up and say, hey, I forgot to tell you that last shift we had this problem or that problem. So they started problem solving, across the shifts into different departments. And so they started breaking down, a number of these silos. So I think, your problem around challenges with leadership, it's around how do we learn, how do we think about risk, how do we redesign the workplace, because the technology itself is around about 70% of the 30% of the solution. The other 70% is the change in work practices, how you bring people along, etc. But yeah, look, that would be my first comments, and I'll hand over to Brett for some of his.
Yeah, look, and I think you've touched on a couple of really key points, but one I think that I've seen a few times is around that idea of the vision of upper management. I think is often quite clear as the end outcome. It's that transparency of information, that quick information, better decision making, better communication. What probably isn't as clear to maybe some of the more senior management is the vision of the journey. And like you said, what's going to happen to the individuals who are going to experience this change, and rightfully so, how's it going to change their role? And I've certainly experienced the same thing, where I have a lot of support and drive from upper management teams. It's the frontline leadership team that generally have the biggest issues, and mainly because the group that we're looking at changing the most is their operational group. And if they have any, like you mentioned, risk to that group, not liking the technology, not engaging with it, not using it, that frontline leadership group is the first group to experience the problem and ultimately have to face the most questions. It's not too bad from a senior leader, project manager point of view when you have 3 or 4 people raising issues with you and asking questions. It's a bit of a different matter when there's 30 of them mid-shift all wanting to know different information whilst running a operation. That's a very different stress level and zone. So I must admit, I've noticed the same thing. Supervisors being not the hardest group, because quite often, a lot of the time, they're interested in it, but the way you engage them, the pace in which they're engaged, and the functionality you provide to them at what time, I believe is a key part to getting that digital transformation journey underway. I must admit, I also think there's that supervisory and frontline management level also has a component of what we would call, or what I would like to say is, I guess, storytelling for the data. The way they generally use it is they get all the data together, they get to massage it, manipulate it, and then present it to up the chain, so to speak, or in a forum. When we're talking about transparent data, all of a sudden everybody's got all the data straight away. And I have seen situations where the supervisor's phone starts ringing flat out because everybody who's in front of a PC decides they want to know the minute micro elements of what's going on from day to day. And in their mind, they've been doing this for 20 years, 30 years. They know what's going on. They've got a plan for it. They've just had to explain it to the last 3 people that got on the phone. If you happen to be the 4th person that comes up, you might get a little bit of a shorter answer than what you were maybe expecting in the first place. But I think it's important because, again, when we talk about risk in the market we're in, and we've been here for a while now, we want to make sure that those people are on board with the journey and certainly aware of what they're going to be in for before they start, because otherwise it can be challenging for them. So certainly, I think when we're looking at deploying these things and we're working with senior leadership teams, getting them to take a step back and maybe putting forward some of that experience for what their frontline management teams are going to see gives them a chance, or gives all of us a chance to structure that rollout in a bit more of a controlled fashion and hopefully mitigate some of those problems as we see them coming along.
Yeah, I think just to chime in there as well, just around the coaching piece. So we always miss it, and well, not always, but a lot of operations that I see taking a step towards really great technology or a digital plan, they miss a number of those levels. And so we've had an experience where we've been going to do a deployment and it's been really quick, and the CEO has said, we want you on site and we want you on that site in a month or 2 months. And my response was, well, I haven't been to the site yet. I haven't spoken to the site leadership. I need to engage with those guys and get buy-in there. And he said, no, they'll just jump on board with, this is what I'm saying and this is how it'll work. And so you go to sit, and it didn't go as well as we would have liked. And so we did have to go through that re-engagement process. And so what we've learned over the years is you've got to coach in both directions. So you've got to coach top down, how you use that. And that's exactly to your point, Brett, is you got to coach on don't pick up the phone to a supervisor and start nailing them, because they've got a superintendent for that. And that's their job. And their job is also to protect their supervisors as well, so that they can get on with their work. And vice versa, it has to go the other way as well. So you've got to coach the supervisors on the language that they need to use and how they talk to the crews. So that was for us in a deployment probably 5-6 years ago was a crucial learning. In I would say the first week.
Just to add to that, I think when companies pitch digital transformation to senior leadership, when senior leadership comes out of those meetings, they think that digital transformation is going to be like pixie dust. That'll make all the problems go away, right? And in reality, two things happen. One is the minds don't necessarily always trust things coming down from corporate. Number two is when corporate starts talking about the what rather than why, there is increased mistrust. And especially, like all three of you guys have alluded to, is the supervisor's job changes the most, and they distrust anything that's coming down from the CEO the most. All right, so that's it's an element of risk that is not captured and accounted for during this whole planning process. And people think by doing digital transformation, you'll suddenly get more production in the next 90 days. It ain't going to happen, right? So setting expectations with the leadership team is also super important.
I thought maybe I would kind of jump in and comment a bit about this concept that Brett raised, which is the journey of implementing technology. I think we're actually, from a leadership perspective, there's a couple of things that we can do differently to embrace this journey concept. And I'm going to just a small anecdote to describe it a little bit about something that's pretty dear to my heart, which is vacation. Right? I really like vacations. And but if you approach the plan of your vacation that this is a once in a lifetime experience, and I've got to make sure that this is the best thing that ever happened to me, in my entire life, you're probably going to fall short. Or you may never even go on this vacation because it's like, well, I got to go to, I want to go to Egypt, but I also want to see the Louvre, and I also want to, travel on a riverboat down the Mississippi. I mean, this once in a lifetime experience is never going to happen. And I think we tend to look at, which is an honest thing for the mining industry. We look at technology as a capital intensive project because mining is capital intensive. We don't look at it as a journey. And as soon as we put this capital intensive lens on a technology project, we tend to squeeze a budget, try to get the most out of this budget that we possibly can. We bite off way more than we can chew because it's if we don't use this budget this year, we're not going to get it next year. And then we're really quick to judge ourselves as failures. But technology is a different thing. We need to look at technology more like you would a travel budget, something that is, we're going to start here and we're going to progress. And it's the way we do things now. Because an evolutionary approach to technology will always beat a major project that's got a lot of pressure to deliver to this specific timeline. And so my feeling on this journey is leadership can fix this. And we can fix it by focusing on rapid return on investments from very small projects. And if we do that, what happens is the supervisor whose life has changed so dramatically looks at it and goes, well, hold on a second. That seems to be working and solving, a very small problem that I have. I'm realizing value from it. And then he starts to pull the technology and help the technology get adopted. And so I think that concept that Brett raised about journey is critical.
And just one quick one on that, Mike. So I just wanted to, Michelle mentioned that when you tried to implement a project beforehand, start with the older crew because they might struggle with the technology, and you lost the younger group a bit. I've also seen similar situations occur in some of my projects. But I also think that supervisory group is a group that I probably wasn't ready for rapid adoption from, and they have the potential. And I've sort of formed a view over the last couple of years that our older generation, people towards the back end of their careers, haven't grown up with technology, aren't particularly interested in learning new things because they're on their way out of the industry anyway. The younger group just coming in have had, like you said, Michelle, technology that is super intuitive, that it knows what they want. And some of the programs we go to with mining aren't quite that well developed. I have found that, and I'll call them the 30 to 45 year age group, and they're often the ones that are running around supervisory roles at the moment, have been a little bit more forgiving of the technology. And I'm considerate through no research, but it seems to be that maybe they've grown up with they've grown through the age of not having a mobile phone. They've gone through all of the old stuff that we used to have. So they're a little bit more forgiving. They look at it, they go, yeah, it's basic compared to my mobile phone, but I see where it's coming from. So I think our supervisory groups are actually a really a group that we can gain a massive amount of benefit from, not only in the fact that they're working with the end users primarily, but also from a technology point of view, they're in quite a good headspace if we get them on the right side of the coin early on in the process.
Yeah, I think that's all about comfort, right? So at some level, everyone has a different degree of comfort with whatever it is, whatever project we're going to embark on. And the reason why an evolutionary journey is more successful from my perspective is because you can develop that level of comfort on your own time as you start to see the value in your life from the technology. So back in the late 90s, when we were implementing the autonomous trucks, like the first operational autonomous trucks, we learned the most by actually running the trucks autonomously. There was all sorts of pomp and circumstance around bringing it up, what we had to do and all these things. But we learned the most about actually running those trucks autonomously, loading them, having them move the material. And that's not to say that we should be careless about deploying technology, but I think these small bites of tech projects that are manageable, that we expand over time, helps people develop comfort at their own pace, and you can experience it more. So you can see when people are developing the comfort, and you can actually feel that this is successful with this group, but not this group. But you haven't taken some catastrophic leap that says everybody today is going to implement everything across the world as of this, like this. And because you haven't taken that leap, you can learn as you go. So that's why, that's that journey thing and that evolutionary approach, which I think helps develop that comfort.
Yeah, and Mike, I think that's important for a number of reasons, all wrapping around risk. So whether it's the risk of people being uncomfortable and then, you having negative behavioural impacts, and then, it's harder to get people to change the way they go about doing things because they're now set against the technology, or whether that's, even just buying 25 trucks, if I take your automation example, and having to learn with 25 trucks rather than learn with one, make some changes, get the second or third one, adapt your systems. So I think this idea around, I know it sounds all fancy, minimum viable product, but basically all it really is what's the smallest thing you could put in place to test out the idea, experiment with some of the behaviors, get those behaviors done, and then embedded, and then advance the scale or the size of the technology. And a good example of that, again from the past, was we went to set up a process of short interval control, backing onto these devices that I just spoke to you about that we'd put in place. And the idea was to do this across the whole organization, so everybody had the same system. But we were, obviously you start at one mine site, you've got to sort of learn, adapt, change. One of the other mine sites came to me and said, look, we don't want to wait for all of that rubbish that you guys are going through. We've got this short, sharp little piece of tech that we could put in place that does this sort of short interval control. And, we could have gone one or two ways. You could have gone, no, let's wait for the whole rollout and let's wait for the big bang and stuff. But, instead we said, okay, not a lot of money, not a lot of risk, just don't fall in love with your version of the product. Or if it's better than what we're developing over here, then we'll all swap to yours. But either way, don't fall in love with the technology, fall in love with the way the technology helps you and the processes you're going to change and the behaviors you're going to change and the outcome. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so by the time we got to implement at that mine site, not only that had they already locked in a lot of the behaviors and people had got used to using technology for that particular activity, etc., they'd come up with some really great stuff we hadn't thought of in other mines, and other mines had thought about some of the things that they hadn't, and we had this opportunity to then merge ideas and readapt some of the technology. But I think those small bite-sized pieces, and seeing this as a journey rather than a destination, because I think that's one of the other challenges we have in mining, is we sort of go, well, thank God I built my processing plant. That's a castle, so that's good for the next 100 years. It's a bit like grandpa's axe. I'm just going to replace parts, and but it's going to stay there. So we see it as a destination rather than a journey that we're just going to constantly refresh and upgrade and drive value through the behaviors or the outcome form.
So somebody's
I think
got
we
their
also
clipboard with digital transformation. Tablet. Sorry, somebody got their tablet.
KPI
Digital transfer.
job.
Digital transformation done. Yeah, it'll never be like that.
Yeah,
we did
exactly.
it.
I think further to that point though, we often underestimate, and I think a lot of businesses do, and especially in the mining space. That was one of the things that I found when I was first in an operational superintendent role, was that a bunch of my truck operators, there is so much intelligence in those crews that it's not utilized. It's underestimated. It's, there's all of this potential just driving around in a truck. And when I say just driving around in a truck, if anyone has been on a mine site and spent time in a truck on night shift, those hat off to truckies.
Oh, yeah.
I think they are, they're unspoken heroes. But
lasted about a month before I couldn't do it any longer. So they are fantastic. I actually had a trucker who was a day trader. He made more money day trading. And the only conversation I had to have with him is, dude, you can't do it in your truck. You're going to have to do it offline. I just don't know what to tell you. You can't multi-skill.
You can't do that here. Yeah, please don't. But those individuals are phenomenal when it comes to looking for potential opportunities, and that's where a bunch of Max Mine champions have come from for sites. We've got a couple of guys who are now at superintendent level who started off for truck operators, but saw, oh, sugar, I can do this with the system. And then they started getting all their mates involved in the process. And before you know it, well, they've taken the whole crew on that same journey. And so if you enable those crews and those people effectively, then they'll actually come up with the solutions to the problems. And as you say, like the MVP thing, that used to be the startup term, right? Like you need to get to your minimum viable product and then we're going to launch. Well, with when you're looking at the transformation space, they come up with the ideas and then you just give them the power to go and implement the changes. And that in itself becomes a digital transformation. It doesn't have to be over the top. And it blew me away just looking at something like off-circuit travel, just how quickly, and we actually now call it excess travel as opposed to off-circuit travel, because there's this whole concept around how that sort of changes, but the operators go and work it out themselves using some of the tools that are provided to them. So I think there's lots of tiers there that we can tap into, and maybe just even to go back to the point before about labor supply or labor shortages. And this is, Michelle, coming back to your point around making mining sexy, we try and make it sexy in the tech space that they get to come and work on mining problems. But the thing that blew my mind, and I think it might have been Paul Lucy, if anyone follows him, is a chap in Perth. He likes to put some interesting comments out. And one of the things that he highlighted, and I don't know if it's true or not, but there are more people or more people going into forensic science than there are into mining engineering.
Oh, well, it depends whether he includes India and China in those numbers.
Yeah.
But in Australia, he's absolutely right. I mean, this year, Adelaide University, I think 2 mining engineering graduates. UQ, I think, have cancelled their mining engineering course. Curtin's down to about 25. I think the whole of Australia, we're going to graduate something like 40, and we need something like 400 a year just to replacement and the projects that we've got coming and things. But India and China both each do about 400,000.
It's
100%.
Story in the US as well. It's a very similar story in the US as well. I believe the University of Reno, University of Nevada in Reno has like 5 undergrad engineers, and it's like the second most popular mining engineering school.
Just Hollywood.
One last point to add to what Kim said earlier was what we've seen work very well in the past, and I don't know why we stopped, encouraging our new customers to do it, is doing user councils. This is before the product is even introduced. Just sit down with supervisors and crews, over multiple days just to understand what the problems are, and then show them the product or the system, solicit their feedback, and implement 1 or 2 things that are top of their mind before you even start the rollout. That has changed, like what Kim just said earlier, you build champions just through a simple process that does not take more than a day, day and a half.
Yeah. But you're not building them; they're building themselves, right?
Yeah,
Because they
you're
take
not
the
forcing
passion.
them, you're not nudging them.
Yeah.
Then they start pulling you.
Yeah, and you get users. This is the thing that blew me away. Looking at when people log into the system, when you've got a passionate user, like a passionate truckie that can log into the system, we were seeing operators. They would log in on their phone in camp to have a look at their max mine scores at like 4:30 in the morning before they get to site. So then when they get to site, they go, all right, cool, this is what I'm going to do for the day today. And when you've got people that are that passionate, they can take a whole heap of other people on that ride as well. And we that's the piece that I think we need to enhance in this process, is enabling those guys.
Well, my takeaway is we need to get this panel. The next objective needs to be to write a mining screenplay for Hollywood. Because the CSI TV show is driving all this enrollment in forensic science, and I've yet to find a movie where we don't have the CEO of the mining company as the evil villain,
as the asshole.
Yeah,
exactly. We have to. So I've started the screenplay. So anybody who wants to support is,
fantastic, Mike. Because do you know what even annoys me more is we even sort of make superheroes of serial killers on television series before mining engineers. Now, where's the justice in that?
Yeah,
exactly.
But I think it's a great point though, Mike. It is TV programming, right? But it's an unexpected consequence is getting the forensics grads or applicants up. But it is that social conversation, I think, is the big hitter, right? Like you look at the coal sector, right? They're just getting slammed at the moment. And I'm all for, taking a green path and making sure we do it in an effective manner. But, we need coal to create steel, as well as, the energy transformation. And yet it is just being rubbished into the ground. And so therefore, kids don't want to go into that space because their parents are maybe talking about it, or they, it's got this bad perception. And so, I agree. Either we need a movie or, we need to bring the sexy back to mining.
So this is a great conversation. I think we should have another panel session to continue on some of these topics. And I had an agenda to talk on some other pieces as well, but I didn't want to disrupt the conversation. But we touched upon a lot of those, whether it is, resistance to change, the role of a supervisor, what does integration of different technologies mean, and so forth. But this is a great discussion. I would like to take up a few questions. People, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. We'll try to get some of them answered now, and if we can't, we will follow up after the session with responses. So one question that we have is, in other industries, we typically manufacture things on capital equipment that has a lifespan of about 5 years. However, in mining, it seems that we have aged 20 to 40 years old, capital equipment being upgraded with additional hardware, sensors, and software. Would our industry have more success in digital automation initiatives if OEMs provided equipment with shorter lifespans, but products sold have the new technology infrastructure integrated into their products? That's the question.
Go ahead.
Yep, go. You go.
Okay, so look, I was going to jump in with a couple of comments. So I always get a bit nervous when we talk about more disposable things, just from a world sustainability perspective. But what I like about the question especially is how can we more easily upgrade or extend the life in a technology perspective, and how do we think about how we design a lot of our processes and processing plants? So that would be one. And the one difference with us and other industries is, often we've got an ore body, an asset, or the raw material that has got a lifespan of 20, 50, 100, in some cases even more than that. So I think there's a balance there. The other thing though that I think is really interesting and might come to that in some respects, and again it's around how we design and interoperable, but it made things more modular. So one of the weird things that's happened in mining over a period of time, and I think gone beyond the sort of parabolic curve where you sort of get better and better and better, and then suddenly you add more capital in and it gets worse and worse and worse, or people, or, you know, whatever it might be, is this whole bigger is better thing. And, you know, I just take an example of the 400-ton trucks, for example, which I still argue whether the 400-ton trucks were ever a fantastic idea, just from their maintainability and all of the other things that go along with them. But once you sort of automate, so again, once you start using digital technologies and you digitize and you have this digital transformation, there's a lot of modeling to suggest that you can come right down. So even, you know, and again, I did this modeling for one site where they were using 400-ton trucks, big dirt moving site. They could come right down to actually almost to 80-ton trucks and still get the same productive outcome once they started automating. So, and I know that's a truck example, but I think exactly the same with processing plants. You know, why don't we have 4 trains rather than one big process, and think differently about that? Because what that then allows you to do potentially is upgrade more readily, because you're only going to take a quarter of your production down, let's say, in order to upgrade that. And again, it's things we used to talk about years ago. Like we used to talk about how, you know, how do you strip quickly a truck's harnesses and all the electrics?
You've just cut out, Michelle.
Yeah, it seems like.
Maybe
Great
if
in
I can.
Australia.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to jump in there,
Yeah.
Michelle. So I had this debate internally, and you know, this was a conversation that was going on inside Rio quite a while back around, you know, how do we with the and I'm looking at it from a load and haul point of view, and yes, there are, you know, fixed plant you know, concepts that go along with that as well, but when you automate, you then all of a sudden the ability to step into that space where you could, you know, drive down to your Iveco dealer, pick up a truck and take it to site and be able to just put it into the system with a really basic automation technology that you could plug in. I think that starts to flick a switch, right? And because we've been such a capital intensive business for such a long period of time, and the value sits in the ground and it's always there. It doesn't go away. It's not like you're manufacturing a car where the better you do it, the better your returns. And you know, there's a saying, which I won't repeat it word for word, but you know, this ore deposit is that good, not even we can stuff it up, right? That was something that was said by another colleague that I know, and it's true, because that's the nature of, you know, where we've come from. And then you look at the journey of going from, you know, the original sort of 10, 12-ton trucks, and then they just gradually grew because we had to manage the people that went into that. And so, and anyone who's done a trip to China and had a look at what happens in a mine in China will blow your mind. You're talking sort of 500 trucks in a mine with everything from 10-ton to 220-ton rolling around in that space, and it's interesting and scary all at the same time. And so, you know, I think as the automation piece comes in and that digital transformation piece rolls on and the adaption of automation becomes easier, then I think we can step into a much more modular space. But I totally agree, Michelle, we don't want to be going into that disposable culture. I think the one thing that we've had for such a long period of time is, you know, we can have assets that can last 25, 30 years and still be delivering value. And, you know, so that you do have to play on both sides of the coin, I think.
For this, what at least what we are starting to see in the industry as well now is most companies are moving towards a Tesla kind of model, right? Which is pre-fitting all the machines with all the required sensors and then all the actuators as well. So the technology can come even 20, 30 years down the line, but you already have the infrastructure, the mechanical, the instrumentation, electrical infrastructure in place to leverage those things later on through APIs and all of that. didn't used to be possible 20, 30 years ago. But I mean, with the, state of the art in hardware design, software design, API design, it's, you can still buy a piece of equipment that will last 40 years and without having to retrofit, still be able to use the latest and greatest innovations that happened 30 years out on that same machine without having to retrofit.
It also provides another challenge, right? So how can you go, we've done recently where we've been able to identify what a grade is doing, even though it doesn't have a CAN bus.
Yeah.
And we've got some really cool tech that doesn't require additional sensors, but it's enabled us to identify what that grader is actually doing and is it working in the field. And these are super old graders. And,
Yeah.
So we're looking at it going, well, we know that there's a whole bunch of these assets out there that people don't want to dispose of. So let's find a technology solution that's going to give the site the outcome that they're after. And so I think that, it does go both ways, but I think it's also a great example that we are preparing ourselves for the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not taking away from that. I mean, yeah, retrofits do play a role, but the thing is, all the new machines that are coming out are coming pre-installed with most of these sensors. At least that's what we see. It's still a challenge that the OEMs are not opening up those APIs just yet, but I think the industry is going to be driving behavioral change within the OEMs itself to open things up so that it can innovate faster.
100%.
And I think you're right there, Satish, particularly with the OEM and the competitive nature of the industry and the equipment component, particularly mobile plant. I think, Kim, you guys have obviously seen that firsthand with the way you do retrofit, tech to equipment. But to Satish's point, like you said, we've seen so much more sensors and standardization amongst sensors and technology on mobile plant in the last probably 10 years, probably more so than we have beforehand. It does open up a big opportunity for us to, I guess, get more lifespan out of our equipment, because realistically, with proper maintenance, we can keep those machines running a lot longer. And if we can, to some extent, modularize components, particularly when we're talking, let's face it, about tech, is so much, it's that electronic component, that hardware, those harnesses, that does have a finite life. So if we can work out how to efficiently retrofit some of that equipment, then we've got a big opportunity in the particularly mobile plant space.
I think we have one more question. Michelle, that's for you, I think. I work hard with your colleagues in South Africa, trying to get their senior secondary students interested in mining. What is missing is some introductory skill set clusters to get them excited. We need industry to help drive change in this space. Thoughts? I would also add in another piece to it, just talk around skill set that digital transformation brings in, other than what the supervisors' needs are. What other new roles are emerging and so forth?
Yeah, okay. So look, I assume they're suggesting South Australia rather than South Africa, but it's,
sorry.
That's cool. Most probably it's exactly the same in South Africa as well. So look, I think they've got a couple of really good points there. One is how do we get young people to get really interested in STEM, which is sort of the building blocks of a lot of the technical roles and or some of the practical functions that we have with maintainers and operators, etc. And I think that is a real challenge for the industry and to really lean into, because I think it's beholden on all of us to start engaging with young people rather than avoiding some of those conversations. I remember the scariest thing I ever did in the last couple of years was go and present on mining innovation to an MBA class. And this was in Toronto. It was when I was living in Canada. And, there's 100 young people I'm sort of looking at, and they've all got their computers up and they're staring at me, they're typing, they're looking, with very sort of, suspicious gazes at me. And the first question I asked them was, who believes that the mining industry should exist? And, you know, one person tentatively put up their hand right at the back, hoping that none of their mates saw them. And so, you know, the conversation started with not innovation in mining, but, you know, what do we think about mining, et cetera, and why it exists. And I remember the last question I got was from a young lady who said to me, so, you know, this is all fine and dandy. Why should I be bothered with this industry? And so, Kim, I loved your intro. And so my response to them was, well, you brush your teeth, so you need fluoride as a starting point. And if you think we suck and we do it so badly, come and join my team, come and join us and help us make it different. Because, you know, that's the thing at the end of the day. So I think we have to stop being scared of the conversations, because, you know, I can tell you that was
No.
Yeah.
age with these people that really would be the thing. And then, you know, coming to your point around different skills, there is a raft of really important skills that we're going to have to bring into our industry above and beyond all of that. You know, some of the ones around, you know, instrumentation, some of them around data science, some of them around, you know, all of those sort of add-on skills to some of the things we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm seeing most of this, right, and maybe it's a generational thing, and I honestly don't know what my grandchildren will be doing, you know, in terms of education, because anything that makes you sweat is something that people are not interested in learning anymore. Forget mining, even construction, you know, factory work, nothing. So, you know, it's something that we as, you know, middle-aged and older people need to address, saying that STEM is still important. And I think, you know, in countries like India and China, I mean, that's they look at STEM as a way out of, you know, whatever situation, whatever economic bracket they are in. But for tier 1 countries like Australia, US, Canada, and so on, I don't see, you know, younger generation miners. I don't see younger generation construction workers, rail operators, you name it, or even haul truck drivers. I mean, logistics, you know, road truck drivers anymore, right? So there is, yeah, I don't know how you address that, though.
Yeah,
Maybe take that as a topic for next time, you know, more deep dive into skill set. But this has been great. I think we have a few more questions that came in, but we will respond to them after the session. And so thank you everyone for your time here. And we will post this on our website, and we have a recording that we'll share with everyone who is registered. So thank you for the session. This was great.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great to speak with you.
Bye.